47,000 Macedonians against 100,000 Persians. Open plain, no advantage, just math that says you lose. This is October 1st, 331 before the Common Era, and Alexander is staring at the largest army ever assembled to crush him. Darius III has leveled the ground. 200 scythed chariots wait with blades on their wheels, 15 war elephants from India. The best cavalry from Bactria to the Mediterranean. And one goal, break the Macedonian line before Alexander can think. The odds are so lopsided that Alexander's second-in-command, Parmenion, suggests a night attack. Steal the win in darkness. Alexander refuses. He says he will not demean himself by stealing victory like a thief. But here's what nobody tells you. This is not bravado. This is calculation. Because while everyone sees the numbers, Alexander sees something else. Terrain that Darius prepared too well. An army that stayed awake all night fearing a raid that never came, and a gap that will open the second the Persian king moves wrong. By sunset, the Persian Empire will be finished. Not weakened, finished. And it happens because of 6 moves that rewrite how battles are won. If you value documented ancient warfare history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which cities you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Arrian's Anabasis Alexandri, written in the 2nd century of the Common Era, which drew directly from Ptolemy's first-hand account as Alexander's general, and from the November 2024 article published in History is Now magazine examining Persian force composition through multiple archaeological sources. We cross-reference these with Curius Rufus and Diodorus Siculus to verify numbers and movements. Now back to the information. The Persian king has 300,000 men by some counts, maybe 100,000 by modern estimates. Alexander has 40,000. The terrain is tight. Darius cannot deploy. The Macedonian phalanx, 18-foot pikes called sarissas, pins the Persian center while Alexander leads his companion cavalry in a wedge straight at Darius. The Persian king breaks, he runs, leaves his mother, his wife, his daughters, leaves his entire camp. The psychological damage is catastrophic. Darius offers Alexander 10,000 talents of silver and half his empire to make peace. Alexander says no, there cannot be 2 sons. One must set. Hissus taught him that narrow ground kills numerical advantage. So he moves north to Gaugamela, a village on the banks of the river Bumidus, 7 miles from Arbela in northern Mesopotamia, modern-day Erbil in Iraq. The plain is flat, featureless, perfect for cavalry and chariots. Darius has his engineers clear bushes, level rises, smooth the ground for the scythed chariots that will tear through the Macedonian phalanx. He even plants caltrops and digs hidden pits to break cavalry charges. This is methodical. This is a man learning from defeat. The northern path is longer but easier to forage. His men will not suffer the heat. He crosses the Tigris in late September. No resistance. On September 20th, a lunar eclipse turns the moon blood red. Total eclipse, visible to both armies. The Babylonian astronomical diaries, written just days after the battle and published in contemporary analysis by historian Jonah Lendering in 2004, record that panic spread through the Persian camp. An eclipse before battle is a bad omen. Persian soldiers, many of them conscripts with no combat experience, are already demoralized before a spear is thrown. Neither can see the other. Alexander takes a scouting party and personally reconnoiters the Persian camp from higher ground. He captures more scouts who give him exact details: the leveled terrain, the trap locations, the size and composition of Darius's forces. That night, Parmenion comes to Alexander's tent. He suggests a night attack. The Persians will not expect it. The confusion will help. Alexander refuses. He says he must defeat his enemies openly. But the real reason is tactical. Night fighting is chaos. If the Macedonians lose in darkness deep in hostile territory, there is no retreat. If they win, Darius can claim he was not defeated fairly. Alexander needs total victory, psychological and material. He goes to sleep. Darius keeps his entire army under arms all night, standing in battle formation. By morning, the Persians are exhausted. October 1st, 331 before the Common Era, mid-morning. The Macedonians march out. The Persian line stretches across the plain, far outflanking the smaller Macedonian army. Modern estimates of Persian forces range from 52,000 to over 200,000 men. Arrian claims 40,000 cavalry and 1 million infantry. Diodorus says 200,000 cavalry and 800,000 infantry. Curtius Rufus puts it at 45,000 cavalry and 200,000 infantry. The numbers are inflated by ancient propaganda, but the consensus is clear. Persians outnumber Macedonians at least 2 to 1, possibly more. Conservative modern estimate is 100,000 Persians. Alexander has 47,000. 40,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry per Arrian's account published in the Anabasis in the mid-2nd century. C. The right wing under Mazaeus has Syrian, Mesopotamian, Armenian, and Cappadocian cavalry, another 50 chariots on this side. The line is so long it wraps around both Macedonian flanks. Darius's plan is simple. Use the chariots to break the phalanx, then envelop with cavalry and crush. These are the pezheteiroi, foot companions. Their pikes are 18 feet long. 5 rows deep can strike simultaneously. The enemy is dead before they reach Macedonian shields. To the right of the phalanx are 3,000 hypaspists, elite shield-bearers who can fight as heavy or light infantry. To the right of them, Alexander places himself at the head of the companion cavalry, 7 squadrons. The Royal Squadron, the Agma, is 300 strong. Other squadrons are 250 each, total of about 1,800 elite heavy cavalry. These are the hammer, the phalanx is the anvil. In front of the cavalry, Alexander positions half the Agrianian javelin throwers and half the archers. Their job, kill the chariot horses and drivers before chariots reach the line. On the left wing is Parmenion with Thessalian cavalry and allied Greek horse. Behind the main line, Alexander positions a second line of mercenary infantry and Thracian troops. If the Persians break through or wrap around, the second line will face about and hold. The flanks are refused, bent back at angles so that if Persian cavalry tries to envelop, they hit prepared troops head-on instead of striking the line sideways. The entire army is a mobile hollow square. It can face threats from any direction. This is defensive architecture designed for an offensive strike. Alexander counters with Greek mercenary cavalry under Menidas. They are outnumbered and pushed back. Alexander sends in the Paeonian cavalry and Greek auxiliaries under Aristo. The Scythians waver, but Bessus reinforces with more Bactrians. Now it is a full cavalry melee on the Macedonian right. Arrian writes that the Scythians and Bactrians are heavily armored, both riders and horses. The fighting is brutal. More Macedonians fall here than anywhere else because the enemy cavalry is better protected. But the Macedonians hold. They push back in squadron waves. Finally, the Prodromoi, Macedonian light cavalry under Aredes, hit the Scythians in the flank. The Persian left starts to crack. 200 scythed chariots, wheels fitted with long curved blades designed to cut through infantry legs and torso. Horses trained to charge into packed formations. This should shatter the phalanx. It does not. The Agrianian javelin men and archers step forward. They target the horses and drivers, not the chariots. Horses stumble. Drivers fall. Some chariots make it through the skirmish screen. The phalanx does not panic. On command, files open. The chariots roll through empty lanes. Macedonian infantry close around them, drag the drivers down, kill the horses. Curtius describes this as infantry opening ranks to create boxes that trap the chariots. Within minutes, most of the 200 chariots are destroyed or captured. The weapon Darius counted on to break the line has failed completely. The cavalry engagement has pulled Bessus farther out. Gaps are opening in the Persian center as Darius shifts troops to reinforce his wings. Alexander sees it. He wheels his companion cavalry hard left, forming a massive wedge, himself at the tip. This is the traditional Scythian cavalry formation Philip II adopted and Alexander perfected. The wedge concentrates maximum shock at a single point. Alexander charges through the gap in the Persian line. The hypaspists and the right wing of the phalanx wheel with him, keeping formation. The wedge drives deep into the Persian center, straight at Darius. Immortals. The Persians fight hard. 2,000 Greek mercenaries stand their ground to buy Darius time to escape. 500 of them die holding the line, but the momentum is unstoppable. Darius is surrounded by Macedonian cavalry. Alexander hurls a spear at the Persian king. It misses by inches. Darius sees the carnage. His bodyguards are dying. Alexander is closing. Darius does what he did at Issus. He runs. He abandons his chariot because the wheels are clogged with bodies, mounts a mare, and flees east toward Arbela. The moment Darius breaks, the Persian center collapses. Soldiers who see their king flee lose all will to fight. Thousands begin to run. They are trying to envelop. Some Persian cavalry break through the gap created when Alexander charged right. They head straight for the Macedonian baggage train. The second line holds. Thracian infantry guarding the camp fight off the Persian cavalry, but the pressure on Parmenion is immense. He sends messengers to Alexander. Urgent. We are being overrun. Need support. Alexander is reforming his cavalry to pursue Darius. He receives Parmenion's distress call. He makes a choice. He wheels his companion cavalry back across the battlefield and charges toward the Persian right wing. The sight of Alexander's cavalry returning is enough. The Persian right, seeing their king has fled and Alexander is coming, breaks and runs. They ride until dusk, cutting down fleeing Persians, reaching Arbela after nightfall. Darius is gone. Alexander captures the Persian royal chariot, weapons and treasure at Arbela. Parmenion occupies the Persian camp at Gaugamela, seizing the baggage train, camels, and the 15 war elephants that never entered the battle. Casualties are disputed. Arrian claims 300,000 Persians killed and 300,000 captured with only 100 Macedonian dead. These numbers are propaganda. Curius gives a conservative estimate of 40,000 Persian dead, which modern historians accept as more realistic. Alexander claimed 500 Macedonian killed and 5,000 wounded, but these figures likely undercount deaths among baggage handlers and camp guards. A realistic estimate is around 1,000 Macedonian dead. Still, the disparity is staggering, 1 to 40 casualty ratio. Within a year, Bessus, the satrap who commanded the Persian left at Gaugamela, murders Darius and proclaims himself king. Alexander finds Darius's body. He gives him a full royal burial at Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid dynasty. Then Alexander hunts down Bessus, captures him, and executes him for regicide. The remaining Persian satraps surrender. Most are allowed to keep their positions under Macedonian oversight. Alexander marches into Babylon unopposed. The city surrenders without a fight. He is welcomed as a liberator. From Babylon, he moves to Susa, then Persepolis. At Persepolis, he seizes the accumulated wealth of the Persian Empire. Ancient sources report 120,000 talents of gold and silver. Modern estimates put this at roughly $3 billion in current value. Some accounts say Alexander burns Persepolis in a drunken rage after a symposium. Others say he burns it deliberately as revenge for the Persian sack of Athens in 480. Either way, the city is destroyed. The Achaemenid dynasty, which ruled for over 2 centuries from the Indus to the Mediterranean, is gone. First at Issus, then at Gaugamela. A king who abandons his army cannot be king. The Persian soldiers who survived Gaugamela knew their ruler was a coward. Even if Darius had lived and tried to rebuild, he had no legitimacy. Alexander understood this. That is why he refused the night attack. He needed Darius to break in daylight where everyone could see. He needed the Persian army to watch their king flee. He needed total collapse, not a tactical retreat. The companion cavalry struck the decisive blow. The hypaspists bridged the two. The light infantry screened and skirmished. This was a combined arms force where every element supported the others. The Persians had more men. The Macedonians had a machine. But it also put enormous pressure on the Macedonian right, where the best Persian cavalry attacked. If Bessus had broken through, the entire plan fails. Alexander counted on his cavalry holding long enough for the gap to open. It did, barely. The prodromoi charge that finally broke the Scythians came at the last possible moment. If that charge fails, Alexander's right collapses, and he cannot make his wedge attack. The margin was razor thin. The refused flanks were critical. When Persian cavalry tried to wrap around the Macedonian line, they hit angled formations that faced them head-on. This bought time for the center to win. The second line was insurance. It stopped the Persian breakthrough at the baggage train and protected Parmenian's rear. Without that second line, the Macedonian left gets rolled up, and Alexander returns from his charge to find his army surrounded. The defensive preparation allowed the offensive strike and companion cavalry equipment, and from the January 2012 World History Encyclopedia article, cross-referencing Arrian with Babylonian astronomical records. Now back to the information. Alexander never intended to fight on rough ground. He just made Darius think he would. The feint worked because Darius was terrified of a repeat of Issus, where narrow terrain killed his advantage. By moving toward rough ground, Alexander triggered Persian overreaction. Once the Persian line stretched, Alexander struck the center. So he positioned light infantry whose only job was to kill chariot horses. This is specialization. The Agrianians were javelin experts from the Balkan highlands. Fast, mobile, accurate. The archers were Cretans, the best in the Greek world. These were not random troops. These were elite skirmishers trained for exactly this situation. When the chariots charged, they did not charge into an unprepared phalanx. They charged into a screen of specialists who killed them before they arrived. Inner riders pushed forward. The formation concentrated force like a spear point. When it hit the Persian royal guard, it did not scatter. It drove through. This is integration. Every unit has a job. Every job supports the plan. There's no room for freelancing. They gave Alexander time to win on the right and in the center. Without Parmenian holding, the Macedonian army gets enveloped and destroyed. Alexander gets the glory because he made the decisive strike. Parmenian gets survival because he made the decisive strike possible. A defeated army that escapes intact can return. An army that is scattered and slaughtered cannot. Alexander pursued for 75 kilometers until his horses collapsed. He captured Darius's chariot, treasury, and supplies. The Persians lost their logistics. Even if Darius wanted to rebuild, he had no money, no equipment, no base. He adopted Persian court ceremonies to legitimize his rule. He kept Persian satraps in power where they submitted. He married a Bactrian princess to unify the empire. He integrated Persian cavalry into his army. This was not conquest for destruction. This was conquest for control. Alexander understood that destroying the Persian military was step one. Step 2 was building a functioning empire. The victory was total, but the empire was fragile. Alexander spent the next 7 years fighting in Bactria, Sogdiana, and India. These were not set-piece battles. These were guerrilla campaigns in mountains and deserts. Gaugamela broke the Persian army. It did not pacify the Persian people. Local resistance continued for years. Alexander's genius was tactical, not administrative. He won battles faster than anyone in history. He governed conquered territory with mixed success. The battle is taught in military academies as an example of how to defeat superior numbers through maneuver, discipline, and shock action. But what is often missed is how close it came to failure. If Bessus breaks through on the Macedonian right, Alexander cannot charge. If the Persian cavalry destroys the baggage train, Macedonian morale collapses. If Parmenian's wing breaks before Alexander returns, the army is surrounded. The plan worked because every element succeeded. One failure anywhere, and the entire structure falls. This happens because of years of training, brilliant preparation, adaptive tactics, and a commander who understood both the enemy and his own forces. Alexander knew Darius would try to use his numbers. So Alexander built an army that could absorb numerical pressure and strike a surgical blow. He knew the Persians would commit chariots, so he prepared specialist troops to destroy them. He knew the Persian line would stretch if pressured. So he moved right until the gap appeared. Then he struck. One day, October 1st, 331 before the Common Era, 6 hours. And when the dust settled, the Persian Empire that ruled from the Aegean to Afghanistan was finished. Not wounded, not weakened. Finished. Archaeological surveys in the 1930s and again in the 2000s have tried to pinpoint the exact location. Sir Aurel Stein proposed coordinates in 1938 based on topographical analysis. Modern GPS surveys place the likely battlefield roughly 36 degrees 21 minutes north, 43 degrees 15 minutes east. The ground has been farmed for over 2,000 years. No mass graves have been found, which makes sense. Ancient battlefields were cleared quickly. Bodies were burned or buried in pits. But the topography matches ancient descriptions. Open plain with low hills to the south where Alexander camped. He later became pharaoh of Egypt and wrote his history from first-hand experience. This is as close as we get to primary sources for Alexander. Arrian is considered the most reliable of the ancient historians because he explicitly states he is using eyewitness accounts. Curtius Rufus wrote in the 1st century of the Common Era, also using earlier sources. Diodorus Siculus compiled his history from multiple accounts. Plutarch wrote his life of Alexander in the late 1st century. All of them rely on sources written by men who marched with Alexander. The numbers vary, the details conflict, but the core events align. Alexander won, Darius fled, the Persian Empire fell. Occurrences. One tablet mentions the Battle of Gaugamela and notes that Persian soldiers left their king and fled. This contradicts Greek sources that say Darius left his soldiers. The Babylonian source is contemporary, written within days of the battle. It offers a non-Greek perspective. The difference is subtle but important. If Persian soldiers deserted Darius, rather than Darius deserting them, it changes the narrative. It suggests the Persian army was already collapsing before Darius ran. The dust on the battlefield made it impossible to see what happened. The Greeks assumed Darius fled because they found him gone. The Babylonians, hearing reports from Persian survivors, recorded that the soldiers abandoned their king. Both can be true. Darius may have tried to hold, but his troops broke first, forcing him to flee or be captured. This makes Darius less cowardly and the Persian collapse more systemic, but the result is the same. The army dissolved. Possible explanations include exhaustion from the march, inexperience of the handlers, or Darius withdrawing them before the battle started, because he knew they would panic and disrupt his own formations. Elephants are powerful but uncontrollable. In later battles like Hydaspes, Alexander faces elephants and learns they can be countered by archers, targeting the handlers and javelins and raging the beasts to stampede. Darius may have realized this and pulled them, or they simply were not ready. Either way, a weapon that should have been a game-changer never entered the fight. At Cunaxa, the chariots caused panic but limited casualties. Hoplites learned to open ranks. By Gaugamela, the tactic was known. Alexander prepared for it. The chariots failed not because they were bad weapons, but because the enemy knew they were coming and had a counter. Warfare is iterative. A weapon works until the enemy adapts. Then it becomes obsolete. Ancient historians inflated troop counts for dramatic effect. 1 million Persians sounds impressive. It is also logistically impossible. Moving and feeding a 1,000,000-man army in 331 before the Common Era would require supply lines that did not exist. Modern historians use reverse logistics to estimate realistic numbers. How much food does an army need per day? How much fodder for horses? How many square kilometers does a 100,000-man army occupy in battle formation? Based on these calculations, most modern estimates put the Persian army between 50,000 and 120,000. The Macedonian count of 47,000 is more reliable because it comes from administrative records. Alexander's army was professional and paid. Records were kept. The number is specific: 40,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry, which suggests it is real data, not propaganda. Each squadron divided into 2 lokoi, which further divided into tetrarchies of 60 men commanded by a tetrarch. This is professional military organization. Every man knew his position. Every position had a commander. Commands flowed down through clear hierarchies. Compare this to the Persian cavalry, which was a collection of regional levies. Bactrians fought differently than Syrians. Scythians used different tactics than Medes. They had no unified training, no common language for commands. When the battle turned chaotic, they could not adapt. 18 feet means the 5th rank can extend his pike past the 1st rank's shields. This creates a wall of pike points. An enemy charging this formation hits 5 layers of spear points before reaching Macedonian shields. It is mathematically unbreakable if the formation holds. The key is holding. That requires training. Macedonian phalangites drilled constantly. They learned to march in formation, turn in formation, open files, close files, all while maintaining the forest of pikes. This is not something you learn in a week. This is months of training, years of experience. Against 18-foot sarissas, the Greeks die before they can strike back. The Immortals carried 2 meter spears, better than Greek spears, but still insufficient. The rest of the Persian infantry were archers and light troops, effective at skirmishing, useless in close combat against heavy infantry. Darius placed his infantry in the center because Persian kings traditionally fought there. But his infantry could not hold against the Macedonian phalanx. But extending the line thinned it. More frontage means fewer troops per meter. When Alexander created the gap, by pulling the Persian left out, the center was already thin. The wedge punched through. This northern route provided water and forage. Mountains on his left protected against surprise. By taking the long way, Alexander made Darius guess where he would cross. Darius had to spread forces to cover multiple points. When Alexander crossed, it was unopposed. Alexander refuses, saying he will not steal victory like a thief. But he has another reason. If they lose a night battle deep in enemy territory, retreat is impossible. Annihilation follows. Alexander also knows Darius expects a night attack. Persian scouts reported earlier reconnaissance. If Darius expects it, surprise is gone. Better to rest and fight in daylight, where Macedonian discipline has advantage. The oblique advance to the right requires precise coordination. The Macedonian army marches at an angle, shifting right while moving forward. If the right advances too fast, the line breaks. If the left lags, a gap opens. The entire army must maintain alignment while moving diagonally under cavalry harassment. Macedonian units trained for this. The Persians saw the movement but could not replicate it. Their line shifted left, but slowly. Gaps appeared. Alexander watched for exactly that. Commanders who read the battlefield and reacted in real time won. The hypaspists fill the gap. This is combined arms. Every unit supports the others. Traitors by Alexander's definition. So they fought to the last, 500 dead to buy minutes. Darius still escaped. The battle still lost. The wing will break soon. Alexander's in pursuit of Darius. He has a choice. Finish the pursuit and maybe catch Darius, ending the war instantly. Or turn back and save Parmenion. He turns back. This shows strategic priority. Catching Darius would be symbolic. Losing half the army would be catastrophic. Alexander makes the right call. Darius escapes, but the Macedonian army stays intact. Later, Alexander pursues anyway. It gets Darius's treasure, if not Darius himself. The strategy at Gaugamela reflects Alexander's overall approach. He did not fight fair. He fought to win. When faced with superior numbers, he used mobility to concentrate force at a weak point. When faced with unfamiliar weapons like scythed chariots, he prepared counters. When faced with coalition armies, he targeted command and control. Kill the king, scatter the army. This is not honor warfare. This is pragmatic warfare. The Greeks had a concept of heroic single combat. Alexander used it for propaganda, but not for tactics. His tactics were combined arms, concentration of force, and psychological targeting. Win the battle by breaking enemy morale. Darius running accomplished that. He demanded Persian court ceremonies including proskinesis, prostration before the king. His Macedonian officers resisted. This caused friction. At Samarkand in 328, Alexander kills Cletus the Black, one of his oldest companions, in a drunken argument over adopting Persian customs. The man who saved Alexander's life at the Granicus, stabbed by Alexander in a rage. Gaugamela gave Alexander the world. It also started his unraveling. Absolute victory breeds absolute confidence. Absolute confidence breeds arrogance. By the time Alexander reaches India in 326, his army refuses to go farther, not because they are defeated, because they are exhausted and their commander has become a tyrant. He has won every battle he has fought, and now he has just destroyed the largest empire on earth. The Persians outnumbered him. They had better ground. They had secret weapons. They had everything except discipline, cohesion, and a commander who understood the mechanics of battle. Alexander had all three, and that made all the difference. After the battle, Alexander marched his army to Arbela, 75 kilometers east. That is a forced march with exhausted troops chasing fleeing enemies. They arrive after nightfall. This tells us the pursuit was relentless. No rest. No stop to loot the dead. Just chase until the enemy is scattered beyond recovery. When Alexander finds Darius's chariot at Arbela, he also finds Darius's bow and shield. These are royal symbols. A Persian king without his bow is not a king. Alexander later returns the bow to Darius's successor when he finds Darius's body. This is not mercy. This is politics. Alexander wants to be seen as the legitimate successor to the Persian throne, not a foreign conqueror. By honoring the dead king, he claims continuity. The message is clear. Alexander is not overthrowing the Persian Empire. He is becoming the Persian Empire. The numbers were lopsided. 47,000 Macedonians destroyed 100,000 Persians in 6 hours on October 1st, 331 before the Common Era. The weapons were unequal, 18-foot pikes against 2-meter spears, heavy cavalry wedges against coalition cavalry, specialist light infantry against scythed chariots. The leadership was unmatched. A 25-year-old Macedonian king who slept before the battle against a Persian king who kept his entire army awake in fear. The result was inevitable once the first moves were made. Alexander forced Darius to react. Darius reacted by stretching his line. The line broke. The king ran. The empire fell, and history pivoted on a single day in the dust of northern Mesopotamia. In a storage room at the British Museum sits a cuneiform tablet catalogued as BM 35603. It is part of the Babylonian astronomical diaries. Line 14 mentions the Battle of Gaugamela. The text reads in translation, "The king of the world fled, the soldiers left the king." 2,400 years after the battle, this clay tablet confirms what the ancient historians wrote. Not the details, not the tactics, but the outcome. Darius ran, the soldiers scattered, and the Persian Empire that stood for 2 centuries ended in one afternoon because 47,000 trained professionals outfought 100,000 coalition troops who did not know why they were fighting. And proven on open ground where there was nowhere to hide and nothing to do but fight, the Macedonians fought better, so they won, and the world changed because of it.